Hello, hello, and welcome to Self Care is Sexy. My name is Chris, and I'll be your host. We're a podcast that's here to generate and share self care ideas with each other. Last episode was an extensive list of 24 different ideas and mindset shifts for self care that you could do instead of a New Year's resolution. And if you're already finding yourself quitting on whatever resolutions you started, check out that list of self care tips that you can easily accomplish and stick with this year. I want to give you a quick preview of what to expect from today's show. For today, I want to make self care super easy and gentle. I know a lot of us are still recovering from the overstimulation of the season, so I've got some really easy reflection questions to help you identify what level of self care you could benefit from, and of course, ways that you can provide that level of care. We're getting to all that after a quick break. Hello, and welcome back to the Self Care is Sexy podcast. I'm Chris. If you're new here, welcome, welcome. I'm so proud of you for seeking out self care today. That's such a big deal. Just take a second and appreciate yourself for taking action towards doing something good for you. This show is all about positive content that gives you permission to put yourself first and at the top of your own to do list today. And of course, if you're a returning listener, thank you so much for continuing to make self care your priority. Well, we've officially made it through the first week of a new year. And if you're like me today, you need something pretty light and easy. So that's what we've got. I'm just getting over a cold that had me in bed for a few days and unable to make it to the studio. So today's recording is going to sound a little bit different than what you're used to. But having been down for a couple of days and just really unable to do anything, it got me really thinking about the different kinds of self care that we need depending on whatever's going on in our lives. So, for today, I wanted to quickly go over the different levels of self care that we need, give you some reflection questions to help you identify which level you might be at, and then, of course, some self care ideas based on whichever level you're currently at. So, when I talk about the different levels of self care, I'm really talking about the levels of effort that you're going to be putting into it. Basic level self care is like in a grading system, it would be like the C. It's the meets expectations level of self-care. The really just the bare minimum of what you need to do to get by, to pass the test. This is not, the F level work where you're completely failing and you're in a bad way mental health wise. I'm talking about, that kind of enough to get by where you're probably passively listening to the podcast and you probably think that self-care is important, but it's certainly not vital at this point. And maybe at this level, at this basic level, you've not really bought into the idea so much that self-care is sexy or that self-help is really a priority. You might just be sort of dipping your toes into the water at this level. And really, this basic level of self-care is just the bare minimum, and I'll get to some different self-care tips for you if you feel like that's kind of where you're at. If you're shaking your head yes and you're like, yeah, that's where I'm at. I know self-care is important. I'm checking out this podcast cuz I thought it'd be fun, or I really was thinking maybe this might help me feel better, but I'm not really all that into it. That would be like the C level kind of basic level of self-care. Now, the next level up from that, if we're talking about the different levels of effort we're putting into it, this would be like your B level of self-care, or maybe your better level of self-care. And at this point, if you're at this level of self-care, this is where you want to figure this shit out. You definitely think that self-care is important and you value self-care. You're tuning into the podcast just because you need some ideas or you need some encouragement. Maybe you've been seeking outside help and you're like, well, this sounds like something that I really want to do. I don't really want to invest that much time into it, so I'm just going to listen to a podcast and get some ideas. And at the B level, or the better level of effort, at this point you're taking at least one or two ideas from a show here and there and you're trying them. Even if you're not going all in, even if you're not being a perfectionist about it. You're just trying these things out. You're seeing, what that looks like for you as far as effort is concerned. You're not willing to like buy any new products or do anything different outside of your normal routine, but you're at least willing to try something different and you're willing to consider these ideas or these mindset shifts that I talk about. And then of course the top tier or the highest level of effort that you can put into self-care, or the best level of self-care. This is like your A plus plus. So this is the top of your game. This is the most effort you're willing to put in. You're ready, you're all into this self-care thing. You're probably listening to the podcast with pen and paper ready to go, taking notes. You're engaged in the content. You're pausing the podcast every time I ask one of those introspective questions so that you can journal on this stuff and really dive in and dig in deep to what this self-care stuff looks like for you and how you can be serving yourself best right now. So those three levels, they're, basic, better, best levels of self-care, CBA if you want to go backwards in that way. These are the kind of levels that I'm talking about when I'm talking about the different levels of self-care. So, for example, for me, having, just been sick for the last couple of days, I'm really at that C level or that basic level of self-care. And that means I'm doing just enough to get by. I'm probably not engaged in some 10-minute facial every day when I'm sick. I'm probably not doing a lot of journaling or reflecting. And I'm certainly not on a yoga mat, working it out while I'm coughing up a lung and sneezing out some goobers. So that's why I wanted to talk about this today and give you this idea, this sense of there are different levels of effort that we put into our self care depending on whatever's going on. And I think recently a lot of people are getting it pretty twisted and they get it stuck in their minds that you got to do this shit perfectly. And that if you're not doing it perfectly, if you're not putting in this, 100% effort where, you're doing your 2024 glow up, waking up, doing some outrageous self care routine that includes, a 10-minute facial and a 30-minute exercise routine and a 10-minute juicing fast or something like that, where you're doing the flaxseed mask and the chia seed pudding and you're just doing all the things. I think a lot of us get really sucked into all the ideas that are out there because there is so much content out there when it comes to self-care, and a lot of us can get lost in that. So today I'm encouraging everyone to just take it easy on themselves. Like I said in my last show, this is not goal setting season. This is really the rest and recharge season. There is some reflection involved in this season, but right now we're all hibernating. We should all be sort of restoring ourselves and really tending to that basic level of self-care. Not getting into some crazy new fitness routine or some crazy new juice cleanse or something that's going to take us really far off of the daily routine we've already been on. I think right now the best use of our time for our mental health is just dialing back our expectations and our level of perfectionism. So I encourage you as I go through this list here of these 10 different reflection questions to just passively listen to these questions, consider them, and depending on what level of self care you're at right now, either do the basic where you're just listening along and considering them in your head, or if you're at that better level where you're considering these ideas and maybe journaling on a couple of them, or if you're at that A plus plus level where you are at the highest level of your game right now, you're taking notes, you're using these as journal prompts, you're going to sit with them, you're going to design some self care this week for yourself around these questions. But remember, whatever level you're currently at, they are all equally valuable. There is no one level of self care that is better than another. And this really does apply to any part of your life, not just self care. I want you to consider this in other parts of your life. What are some other areas of your life that you can dial it back a bit? That other parts of your life that don't need your A level effort? This is the time to start thinking about that. And as I go through these questions, I want you to really start kind of applying this to all different parts of your life. So here we go, my list of 10 questions to help identify what level of effort you're at with self-care. Number 1, are you tired? It's a pretty basic question. Did you get at least 7.5 hours of sleep last night? Are you able to take a nap without feeling guilty or feeling like you have to defend yourself? Is there someone in your life that makes you feel guilty when you take that time for rest? Are you going to bed around the same time every night, getting the same amount of sleep? Is your bed comfortable? Are you in a good place, feeling safe and secure when you lay your head down at night? Are you tossing and turning and scrolling? Or are you winding down in a mindful way, maybe saying some prayers or reading a chapter of your book or listening to some kind of calm app or meditation story or something like that? What does your bedtime routine look like? Are you tired? It's a good question to really reflect on. And again, if you're at the C-level work and you're just doing the basic level of self-care right now, just listen along and consider it. Number 2, do you eat on the run? So, do the people at the drive-through at Jack in the Box know your name and order by heart? Are you eating in your car a lot? Have you popped your head up like 2 or 3 times in the afternoon because you haven't eaten since you woke up? Now, this isn't to shame anybody who's going through the drive-through. Your girl goes through the drive-through consistently. And frankly, I worked at Jack in the Box, so of course I had my own order memorized. I'm not shaming anyone who eats in their car or on the run, but it is a good way to tell which level of self care you're at this point. If you find yourself eating on the run or eating out a lot or ordering DoorDash and not cooking for yourself, not preparing your own meals, or not considering your nutrition at all, that's a really good way to identify what level of effort you're really willing to put in for self care. So just think about it. How is your eating going right now? And I'm not talking about when you're eating or what you're eating necessarily. I'm really more talking about is the way you're eating, is the way you're taking care of yourself in that way, is that A level work, B level work, or C level work? And is there room for improvement or is there room for dialing it back? Maybe you need to cut down on the restriction. Maybe you need to ease up on yourself and not have a perfectionistic mindset. You might have started your New Year's resolution with a clean eating or a healthy eating. Maybe you got into something like that and you're starting to recognize like, hey, this is really difficult to incorporate in my day-to-day life. So really start to think about that in regards to what level of effort you're able and willing to put in right now for self-care. Number 3, do you have more than 3 events planned for this weekend that could be categorized as helping someone else? You might just need to dial up your self care if that's the case. So, when you look at your calendar, when you look at the obligations that you have, do you find that a lot of your obligations are based on what other people need from you or what you're willing to do for others? Maybe you're helping them move, you're helping someone organize, you're going over and assisting an elderly parent, or you're watching the kids so that your spouse can go do something. If you got 3 or more events in one weekend that could be categorized as helping someone else, it might be really imperative for you to start seeing self care differently and maybe leveling up your effort. Number 4, how's your internal dialogue? Is it more like a drill sergeant who's judgy and yelling at you? It might be time for some self care around the way you speak to yourself. If you've got some internal dialogue that is shitty and downright harmful, that's going to tell you at what level you really need to put the self care in. Because even though we talk to ourselves in a negative way, it's usually our brain's way of trying to protect us. Your brain is usually saying some shitty stuff to you because it wants to protect you from whatever harm you're trying to avoid. So let's say you have a pattern of feeling pretty bad about yourself, pretty low self esteem. Your internal monologue is going to keep you away from anything that's going to make you feel bad about yourself. And oftentimes, taking time for yourself is going to feel like you're doing something wrong. And your brain's going to scream at you, like, no, you don't deserve to do that. Only because it doesn't want you to feel the pain of doing something for yourself and feeling guilty for it later. So, if that's kind of the internal dialogue that you're working with, something that you can do quickly to get out of that is to just normalize that thinking and understand that, hey, there's my brain trying to protect me. Your brain is really doing one of two things at all times. It's either trying to protect you from harm or it's trying to seek out something pleasurable. And if you can kind of keep that lens in mind with your internal dialogue, you can usually tell where it's coming from. That way you can decide if you are willing to listen to that shit or just move on. Number 5, are your body products, including your makeup, so old that you can no longer tell what they are? Are the labels rubbed off? Do you have a hodgepodge of self care products that you're not really sure what they are? You've got like the dependable 2 or 3 that are your favorite, and every time you try something new, you just add it to the collection. Well, that's a good indication of what level of self care you really need right now. If you've been accumulating beauty products as a way to feel better about yourself, celebrate that as a win because it just means that you're really trying to give yourself some comfort. You're really trying to invest in yourself. You're trying your hardest to feel better about yourself, whether it's your skin, your hair, your eyes, your teeth, whatever self-care product you're using right now or trying, just remember that you pretty much fall back on 3 or 4 that you like, that work. So don't be afraid, like my last episode suggested, to get rid of some of that other stuff. So often we shame ourselves for buying a tube of some kind of facial product that we don't like, or we don't like the smell, we don't like the texture, and we don't use it, but we don't want to get rid of it because we don't want to waste it. Well, right there, you're sort of negating the self-care that you've given. So you might need to up that level, going from the basic self-care, which is at least you thought to buy yourself something, to the better level of self-care, being okay with getting rid of things that aren't serving you. It goes the same for food. You don't have to eat food that you don't enjoy or that you don't like just because you don't want to waste it. Number 6, is your house spotless right now and all of your laundry done, folded, and put away? I kind of laugh as I ask that question because as I say that to you, I'm staring at a pile of laundry that has not been done all week because I've been sick. And again, when I'm asking these reflection questions, how they relate to the levels of self care is when you start to look at what's really going on in your day to day life, you can tell what level of self care you're in versus what level of self care might benefit you. And this reflection question is really to get you thinking about, is that a priority to you to make sure your house is spotless? Would you rather have a spotless house and a frazzled mind? Or would you rather have a solid mental health state and a bit of a messy house? If there's something that I can send out and encourage you this week is try to let that shit go. Try to let your normal level of acceptance of cleanliness, let it go a little bit. Let the dishes go for a little bit longer than you normally would. Let the laundry go for a little bit longer than you normally would. And allow yourself to rest or read or relax instead. And see what that kicks up for you. If immediately you get a little anxious hearing that suggestion and you start to think, oh, hell no, maybe the people you live with would not accept that at all, or maybe your anxiety level will not accept that at all. Maybe it's time to look at that. Number 7, do people ask you if you're sick or do they say that you look tired a lot? Now, for me personally, obviously, just getting over a cold, a lot of people have said, like, oh my God, you look dead. And of course, that is the truth. I feel like The Walking Dead, even as I'm recording right now. But this content is super important to me, and I think it shows a level of commitment to helping others figure out this self-care thing. Because if there's one thing I'm not going to do in this journey is gatekeep the way I got here. And the way I got here was consistently taking care of myself and evaluating the way I looked at how I was taking care of myself, which includes looking at these levels of self care. If people are asking you, hey, are you tired? Or did you get enough sleep last night? Or, hey, man, you doing okay? You look a little ragged there. If they're coming from a place of concern, and you can tell the difference. You can tell when someone's like putting you down or being shitty versus they really are concerned about you. They care about your well being. But if you find that you're getting that question more often than you'd like, it's time to really consider the level of self care that you've been giving yourself. It's time to consider, where do you fall on that to do list? Are you pushing yourself to appear as if you've got your shit together versus really having your shit together and taking care of yourself? Number 8, do you find yourself super irritated at the slightest inconvenience? This is a huge indication that you need more self care. If you find yourself super irritated because you ran out of toothpaste, or you stubbed your toe, or you went to zip your jacket up and the zipper broke, right? If you find yourself getting super in the red very easily, that's a huge indication that you need a little bit more self care than you've been giving. It might be time to up the level of self care. So instead of just doing that basic, water, sleep, food level of self care, it might be time to up that to doing something in addition to your daily routine that's just for you this week. Number 9, do you know all the trendy sayings? Are you up on all the dance moves? Do you know all the current beef going on TikTok right now? Do you know about the 9-day cruise or the lady with the fence? Are you really invested in what's going on the social medias? If you are, and you know exactly what I was just referencing, it might be time to up your level of self-care. It might be time to really look at where your priorities are. Because unless you were like me and you just spent 3 or 4 days in bed scrolling TikTok when you were awake just because it was entertaining for 5 minutes while you kept your eyes open between, cold medicine and lemon water, you got to look at your priorities and where you're spending your time. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not here to knock social media scrolling. It absolutely can be a form of self care. If when you're engaging in it, it makes you feel good. It gives you a sense of connectedness and you're able to work within it with healthy boundaries. Then absolutely, for fucking sure, get into some of these beefs and these trends and come have fun with us. But if you find that you're doing that in place of feeling, thinking, or being a part of your own life, it's time to up your level of self care. Number 10, and last but not least on my reflection questions to help you identify what level of self care you might need right now. And this is a big one, so take a deep breath with me. Are you okay? I mean it. I want you to ask yourself that. Ask yourself that a couple of times this week. Are you okay? And watch what comes up for you. Sit in that awkward pause and just hear your brain and what it has to say. Now, if your brain's anything like mine, the first 5 or 6 thoughts are all garbage. But somewhere in that garbage is going to be the truth of really what's going on. And to be quite honest, the relationship that you have with yourself is the longest and most important relationship you're ever going to have. So, might be a good idea to develop that relationship by checking in every once in a while. Just by simply asking yourself that question, you're starting to develop self-trust. You're starting to develop feedback for yourself. And this is imperative. And even if you are at the basic level of self-care right now, you're just passively listening. If you do nothing else today, I want you to really sit with that question. Are you okay? All right, I'm going to run through that list real quick. 10 reflection questions to help you identify your level of self-care. Number 1, are you tired? Number 2, are you eating on the run a lot? Number 3, are all your events helping someone else? Number 4, how's that internal self-talk? Number 5, are your self-care products old? Number 6, is your house spotless and your laundry done? Number 7, are people asking if you're tired or sick a lot? Number 8, are you easily irritated by the slightest inconvenience? Number 9, do you know all the trends going on TikTok right now? And number 10, are you okay? All right, so we've talked about the different levels of self-care, that basic level, which, if you've listened to the podcast before and you dig way back into the archives, you can listen to episode number 4 about the When Life Works Best list. This is a list of the 5 things that you do every single day to ensure that you have a baseline of self-care. Or are you at the better level of self care where you're ready to add to the already moving right along self care routine that you've got going? Or are you at the best level of self care where you're willing to try different things? You're keeping track of the data, you're going and getting outside help, and you're ready to basically be interviewed on this podcast because you know what could help other people. Whatever level you're at, whether it's that basic level that you're just getting sleep, water, general movement, and basic nutrition, or you're at the better level of self care where you've got at least 2 or more events planned this week that could be considered personal self care, or whether you're at the best level of self care where you're doing all the above, plus you're working with outside help and you're adding to your self care practices to see what works best for you. No matter what level you're at, all 3 are equally important and all 3 are equally valuable to helping you maintain and have a good relationship with yourself. That's it for this week. Thank you for joining me. If you have a story you'd like to share and you want to be on the show, please email me. It's Chris, Kris, at selfcareissexy.com. Okay, we got some really great content coming your way, so stay tuned. And remember that self care is sexy. We're giving you permission to put yourself first.